So good morning. Happy Friday! Woohoo! Teaching virtually online, in one word, it's very difficult.
It was really difficult just doing it by myself at home, keeping myself motivated and keeping up with the deadlines.
And we had to learn it kind of like by ourselves, even though we did get guidance.
Where does it land?
I feel like I was isolated in my own little bubble. It's a lot easier to fall victim to getting caught up in your own head.
It was difficult but challenging, but we managed and got our stuff done.
Teaching virtually was very different than teaching in person. Last year, end of last year, we got a chance to teach online, from March. However, we were just going over things that we had already previously learned in person. This year is a whole different ball game where I had to teach new information to a new group of students. I actually just learned this year that I get a lot of information in the classroom, just by observation. Because we are a very hands-on class, and we learn a trade. And it's not just theory, we actually put it into practice.
I think that taking this class virtually is a lot different than my other classes, because with my other classes, it's very much like papers and worksheets and readings.
And in order to conform a hands-on class virtually, I had to do a lot of brainstorming, a lot of thinking, a lot of different implementations.
So I feel like taking this class on a virtual platform made it more difficult to communicate with my teacher and peers, and also just ask questions.
Since we were at home, it was easier to step away from working on my collection, at least for me, to go pet my dog, or to go watch TV, or to go get a snack. All of these things would pull me away from working on my collection, and on top of that, the deadlines also made it kind of easier to push off working on my collection.
I think the most important thing I've learned with fashion careers is definitely time management, because we had about a week to pattern the clothes, and then we had 2 weeks to make it in its entirety. 2 weeks may sound like a long time, but with all of our other classes and college stuff on top of that, it was really difficult to get all of this done.
Working with those deadlines definitely made it harder to focus, I'd say.
When students were able to return for in-person instruction, honestly, it was like virtual learning, except they were in the classroom. Most of my students were still virtual because I get students from all over Fairfax County Public Schools. It's not just one school district and one school area. And then the students who did come, one thing they did benefit from in person is that I can physically check what they're working on. And if they were lost, I can go ahead and explain it to them, one-on-one. But also, I wasn't really able to really help like I did previous years, because I had to maintain a 6 feet distance, which on a hands-on class, it's pretty hard.
Once we went back to school, a lot of things changed for me. I had to still sew, so every single day that I had to sew, I had to bring in my sewing machine and all my materials and still hook it up and kind of do that in the beginning of the day.
I feel like taking this class on a virtual platform was difficult for me in the beginning because I had to work by myself and stuff, but now I'm actually coming to school in person, so I think I got to work on time, and I could ask Miss Chang questions easily, so I think that part was the good.
But because our year was cut short in Fashion 1, I felt like I didn't know enough to do this project. And throughout the entire time, you know, when I was patterning, I was just like, oh my God, I don't know if I know enough. I have no idea what I'm doing. Oh my gosh, it's going to turn out bad. Oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing, you know. But then I made these clothes and they fit and they look good. I was kind of sitting back like, what? I actually did it? That's so crazy.
While I was making this collection, it was during COVID, and so I wanted to find the little things that I could enjoy while I was locked in my house. My inspiration was the budding trees against the clear blue sky in the spring, signaling that spring was coming. I wanted to get a lot of bright greens and blues, and I also wanted to work with browns to resemble the trees, and I wanted all my fabric to look kind of soft and delicate. Some of my fabrics were really thin, so I had to get specific needles to actually work with them. And I have one piece in my collection where the peplum, the very bottom part of the one shoulder top, it's a 720-degree peplum. And to make the wavy design, you have to use crinoline. It's like a stiff, almost fabric-like material. And so I had to figure out how to use crinoline to be able to make that design. The most challenging part was finalizing the designs and knowing what type of fabrication I wanted to use. Because when I started, I had a certain idea of what I wanted my collection to be, but then when I looked at the fabrics that I was able to use, I had to like adapt and kind of work around the resources that I had. I definitely feel like I'm able to work on my own more and problem solve on my own as well. I'm really happy that I was able to finish the 3 looks within the time period, and I'm happy that I was able to like try new things with my collection as well, and for them to be successful.
I have always been really into history. I've always loved history, and I'm going to major in history in college and not fashion. So I really wanted to take that historical inspiration and put it in my final project. I stumbled upon hundreds of photos and items, all related to the suffragette movement in London. So my color palette was not directly inspired by the photographs of suffragettes, but rather fashion plates from the 1910s and the 1913s, because all of these photos are obviously were in black and white. Although the yellow jacket really isn't technically historically accurate, that color of the jacket was really inspired by the fabric. When I saw it at the fabric store, I saw the big, huge bolt of fabric, and I immediately said, I need that fabric. I need that right now. The other fabrics that I have, unfortunately, I wasn't able to get them in natural fibers, just budget concerns. So they are synthetic fibers. And, you know, it was a bit hard. That green fabric is really finicky. And I had to I had to adjust the tension on my sewing machines, God knows how many times, which is unfortunate because the green fabric is literally what most of my collection is made out of. I think the most challenging part of designing this collection and making this collection was definitely keeping myself motivated. You know, it was just me and myself and my sewing machine and my dress form just in my room. And, you know, I felt really alone most of the time. I actually just did a final fitting with my model. Everything fits like a glove. She looks amazing in all of the clothes. And I was honestly shocked. I had a lot of doubt on how these clothes would look because my model has a bigger chest than most. She's a bigger girl than most. She's about the same size as me, maybe a bit bigger. So I was really nervous about making clothes for a bigger person than me. But everything fits amazing. And I am so, so proud of how it came out.
So my collection was inspired by some of the themes from the book Brave New World. The author was questioning what was more important, freedom or happiness. So I wanted to kind of ask that question through my collection, not really taking a side so that the audience could kind of maybe come to a conclusion themselves. When I was designing the collection, something else that inspired me was Romeo and Juliet and how they had to struggle against the conflict between freedom and happiness and that choice. I used more darker colors like darker brown and black to emphasize that cost of freedom. And I also wanted to emphasize the happiness of some pieces like the button up in blue. I also use stripes a lot to convey a feeling of confinement because I wanted to anti that freedom aspect of my collection. Working with different types of fabric was fun for me. It was exciting because I got to learn through experience what it was like to work with really delicate fabrics, which I hadn't really had experience with before, how to sew with them, what not to do, how to keep control over them while you're sewing because they're very, very volatile. And I really like to use that mix of delicate and hefty fabrics in my collection, and I'm happy I did because I got a lot more experience. The most challenging thing about making my collection this year was definitely staying motivated, especially at the beginning of the year. Throughout this process, I think I've grown to more understand how I work and what I can use to stay motivated. And I've really tried to integrate what I've learned into more than just my work in this collection. I feel my collection turned out well. There were a couple things that turned out differently than I had originally planned, but I really love those things that ended up differently.
My collection was inspired by the traditional Korean garments called hanbok. I wanted to show others how the Korean tradition that I grew up with shaped me as a person, and I'm proud to be who I am. And I also wanted to show the beauty of Korean tradition through my work. My fabrication and color palette was heavily influenced by the Korean traditional clothing patterns and minhwa. Most of the fabrics I used are from Korea, and I try to use more darker and toned down colors. The most challenging part about making the particular collection was finding the perfect fabric to use. Honestly, after I had the fabric figured out, everything else was fairly simple. Working with different materials and fabrication was fun and interesting. I'll admit that I have worked with most of the materials before, so I had an idea of what I was doing in that aspect. However, I've never used tool before, so it was trial and error process for me. But once I had it figured out, it was fun to use. In my honest opinion, I feel my collection turned out better than I had expected. At first, I was worried about the dress and tulle top, but I think they turned out pretty good. Also, in the photos of the garments, I could see the Korean tradition's inspiration through my work, which was something that I want to show by others while they look at my collection.
My collection was definitely inspired by Impressionist paintings like those of Monet. I've always loved Impressionism as an art form, and it takes a really relaxed approach to art and the concept of just like art for pure joy and art for art's sake. I first came across Impressionist paintings when I was buying a gift for my friend. We were really younger back then, so my collection kind of represents a part of that and the concept of youth and being who you are and expressing yourself the way that you want to. A lot of the paintings have a beautiful day for scenery, like blue skies, and it's very romantic and calm, so I try to use romantic and pastel colors like gold, sunset, light blue, all of that. The use of layering all of the paints in Impressionism was something that I really liked. So fabrics like jacquard or mesh were really useful to kind of get that effect. Working with different materials and fabrication was a mix of interest and frustration. I was learning to sew with fabrics I'd never used before, and each of them had each of their own little quirks. One of my fabrics was really slippery and another one would stretch only in a very specifically weird way. So it was a really diverse array of things to work with, but I think it was still a really fun learning experience. I think the most challenging part and the hardest part for me, it was pattern making. It has a lot of math behind it and a lot of technicality. So I was getting used to acquiring a whole new skill, and it was a big learning curve with lots of trial and error. In my opinion, I feel my collection, it's something that is, in a way, it's natural to understand that conceptualization versus reality is never going to be 100% exact. But for my skill set and my learning experience, I really like the way my collection came out, and I'm proud of the clothes I made. I love being able to say, look at this, I designed this, I made this, and I enjoy having a physical thing to hold of this experience, and I think it conveys my inspiration well.
My collection was inspired by rain. The whole idea is April showers bring May flowers. So I incorporated raindrops and flower prints in my collection. My fabrication and color palette was inspired by the flowers and the rain. So I used different materials to make the rain look realistic. I worked with a lot of clear material and floral prints. The cotton floral prints were pretty easy to work with. The clear material was a little challenging, but it definitely turned out the way I wanted it to. The most challenging thing about my collection was definitely working with the clear material because it was hard to see it under the sewing machine. Specifically, working with my bucket hat that I had for the second look was very challenging because the clear material is not very flexible. So it was hard to get to actually bend the way I wanted it to. I think having a positive attitude, even when things are not looking so great, is always good to have. In my opinion, I feel like my collection came out the way I imagined it, which is the goal for me. And I feel like the critiques I got to make my collection better helped bring my vision to life. And I think that was the best part of the whole process. It just feels like I have a platform to go with now that I've done some work, and I can use that with my future collections and work.
Looked away a little shy, couldn't look you in the eye when I noticed you. The way you walked up to me thinking this can't be true. Oh, coming up a little strong, but you can't scare me. 'cause you're feeling me with fire, electricity. Gonna give me good love. You're gonna give me good love. Gonna give me good love. Gonna give me good love.
My collection was inspired by the autumn and winter seasons, especially the street style that I see during that time of the year. I wanted to make clothes that were sophisticated, elegant, and kind of a contrast from the conventional fast fashion that we see on a daily basis. I formulated my color palette based on the autumn and winter seasons, so I chose to use mostly neutrals and occasionally bold colors. And then for fabrication, I selected fabrics that would match the season that it would be worn in. So I mostly used wool, polyester, and cotton in my collection. Working with different materials was very exciting for me and also a new experience because sewing this collection was the first time that I got to officially make a full outfit from scratch. The most challenging part of making the collection was, I think, sewing the binding onto the coat for my look number one, because that was it's a very tedious process. I feel like I've grown more into a patient person because sewing 3 outfits is a very time-consuming process and it's also very tedious, so it can sometimes get to you. There are definitely some areas where I could improve on, such as the technical side of like the sewing, but I think the end product effectively captures the essence of my collection.
In this process, I've grown in a variety of different ways. I've learned like so many technical sewing skills, a lot of industry standards that I feel are going to aid me when I get older in personal adventures and were once in a lifetime lessons.
Through this process, I've grown, and just working with the material has helped a lot, and like it just feels like I have a platform to go with now that I've done some work, and I can use that with my future collections and work.
I feel like I've grown more into a patient person because sewing 3 outfits is a very time-consuming process.
During this process, I definitely think that I've grown as a person in 2 major ways. The first being my sewing skills. I've definitely refined and improved my sewing skills. I also think I've grown on a more emotional level, just because it was so difficult doing this alone. I really had to dig deep for that motivation and for that will to keep on going.
Through this process, I've grown in my fabric searching, planning on theme, and designing based off of set themes skills. With these skills, I am able to make an actual clothing collection that was cohesive with each other. From this whole process, I felt like I had experienced something that I could probably only experience in a college setting.
I've learned so many things from fashion careers, but one of the most important things that I've really taken to heart from this class was that complaining won't get me anywhere.
The most important thing I learned was to work hard, stay positive, and be humble.
I've grown in terms of learning how to get out of my own head and see the bigger picture and chalk it all up as a learning experience, and I should be proud of the things that I make and can do.
Ms. Chang has also taught me that having a positive attitude and just can be a room changer, and it can change everyone else's mood. And if you can change everyone else's mood in the room, it can get a better outcome for everybody. So I think having a positive attitude, even when things are not looking so great, is always good to have.
I just wanted to thank Ms. Chang Morgan for being with me through this whole fashion journey. I did not really know what I was going to major in before I took fashion careers. And after my first year, I knew that I needed to have fashion as my career in the future. So I really appreciate that Ms. Chang was able to do that for me.
Mrs. Chang, you really have changed my life, and I'm not saying this to be sappy, but seriously, you've taught me school lessons, life lessons, and fashion lessons that all tie in together, and you really are the best teacher I've had in my 12 years of learning in school, like genuinely.
I want to thank you for your sincerity and the faith that you put in us, even when it seemed like the chips were just down and it was too much pressure. You were hardest on us because you wanted us to come out on top and above what anyone else could give us. You didn't sugarcoat anything, you gave it your all, but you also took the time to invest in each of your students and get to know every single one of us, which is something I commend you for.
Thank you for believing in us. Thank you for guiding us and giving us inspirational speeches in class. Your resilience and kindness motivates me, and I strive to emulate that.
I want to say that I am very grateful to have you as my first fashion design teacher. When I first started this class, I wasn't confident about studying fashion design, but you helped me a lot on this journey, and you gave me a confidence that I needed.
Thank you for being patient with me, and thank you for motivating me. And I think from your class, my perspective on my own place in the world has changed, and definitely for the better.
So I wanted to tell my students, first, thank you. Thank you for putting in the work. Thank you for being so gracious to me, for your words of encouragement, for trying your best, for trying again and again. I believe in you. I always will. And you already know I love you. Best of luck in everything that you do.